Hi, and welcome to Gen Friends. I am Cheri Passy. I am from Carolina Girl Genealogy, and I am your host tonight. And I'm so excited because we've got Catherine Lake Hogan from Looking for Ancestors, she's all the way from Canada. Hi, how are ya?
I'm good. Thank you.
I hear you're having some snow.
We did early. Well, yeah, it's Canada. We've got snow.
You gotta have snow if you're Canada. Exactly. Oh, thanks so much for joining us tonight. We're so glad you're here. And family tree girl herself, Shelly Murphy, all the way from Virginia,
Yes.
is with us tonight.
And we don't have snow. It's coming in tomorrow.
We don't have snow, and I hope it doesn't come in at all. I'm in South Carolina. And it's so funny to say all the way because I don't know where you are watching this. So you might just say, hey, it's right next door. But to me, it's all the way. Well, tonight we are going to talk about the next episode, the third episode in the season's Finding Your Roots. And it's interesting how they pair people together. And this episode, we've got three journalists. We've got Christiane Amanpour, we've got Ann Curry, and Lisa Ling are the three that they put together. And at first I was worried. I thought, okay, they're cramming three stories in. Maybe they didn't find very much. Stories are a little, but they weren't. I thought each of them.
They were full.
They were full and they learned so much. Did either one of you have a favorite one that you want to start us out with?
I love Ann Curry.
Okay, then we'll start with Ann Curry.
I'm a follower of her, and I watch her other program that she started. So very excited for her for the questions on her father's, who her father's daddy was and things like that.
She didn't know. He never knew. And they had looked. And before he passed away, they never got to answer that question.
I've probably been following her. She was 25 years on the Today Show. So that's 25 right there. And then the other things she's been doing, and of course her news show. But I didn't know she was doing her own production on that. I thought she had signed in. So got some news on her.
Got some news on her.
But I learned new stuff on her too. Siblings, I've never seen siblings. I know her mom because she used to tell jokes and stuff on Today's Show about her mother because she's Japanese American. And so it was very interesting to see the stuff that they found and was able to track his father.
Right, because all they had his birth certificate and they had a surname.
Yes.
Which was right. The name was WR.
Yes.
Was right.
Yeah.
And so they started searching back from there with that. And they were able to find the father, but they found him using DNA.
Yes.
Which I thought was really interesting. It was like going back to the common ancestor.
Right.
And then working down to potential, this person, this son
of theirs.
Almost
like a process of elimination.
Yes. Yeah. And then they did the DNA with some of the descendants of the man they thought could be the possible father. And then, of course, they all matched. So it was funny because he says to her, so what do you think his last name, his name is? And she was like, oh, I don't know.
I don't know.
It just didn't click, I guess, the right. And I was like, right. His last name is right.
But it was very interesting. And again, lessons to be learned. We follow that same path. Exactly what they were saying they were doing is the same thing that we should be doing if we're not.
Yes. Yeah. And, I'm really, that's all starting to click for me because, I've had all these DNA classes and I'm still learning, but watching them and I'm helping somebody now with the same kind of thing. We're seeing the same couple, the same family over and over in her matched trees. But the problem I'm having with her is there's a family story that somebody else was the dad. Like, not so much because that surname is nowhere in the line. So that's an interesting take on it as well.
Yeah.
But Catherine, do you remember anything about the dad? The dad was quite a character.
Yeah. No, it was the grandfather.
I mean, the grandfather.
Her great grandfather. Yeah, he was Dick Wright. Yeah, and he got himself into some trouble.
A little bit,
just a little bit. What I thought was so funny about that story is when Skip said to her, the sheriff was going to have to kill him. And so he resigned instead.
And then,
is there some commonalities?
So it was her grandfather and the great grandfather. They were both. They both kind of ran in the family. Ran in the family. Alcoholism ran in the family. It seemed like.
Yes.
The father, her dad's dad. So her grandfather, they said he had lost his job. He'd lost his wife. He had, had the problems with alcohol, and perhaps that's kind of the story behind his father making an entrance to the world, and whether he ever knew he had the son is, it was never answered. They didn't know. But I just thought that was so interesting. He got arrested. The grandfather or great grandfather got arrested at a dance hall, and he, he broke a guy's jaw, and he just
nasty.
But was the parents married, or was he illegitimate?
I think he was illegitimate. I think that's why. I think that's
never
why.
Said it.
I believe that's what was inferred because of just having if she can't put his first name on the birth certificate, that kind of tells you that maybe it was like a one-night stand or something like that. So but I loved her reaction when she turned that page and saw his name.
Yes.
And just she kept doing this with her heart.
It got emotional.
Yeah, very emotional.
Because she was so close to him.
Yeah, and he had siblings. He had half siblings, and he asked her, "What do you think your dad would have felt about that?" And she said he would have run right to them.
Run right to them.
Because he didn't like being an only child, so that would have been something he would have
treasured.
So
he definitely, like you said, it was inferred. But it's interesting that they didn't bring that out, and I'm sure that's Anne. I mean, the closest person she had, dearest person, was her dad, and nothing was going to, all the fun stuff came out about the grandfather and the father, but
then they got another generation back. To the immigrant. The immigrants, and they were Margaret, Casey, and William Hill. So it's actually the grandfather's or great grandfather's wife's line. And what was interesting is the one of them came from England and one came from Ireland. They met and they got married. And then they became part of U.S. history because they were homesteaders. So they were able to find that document. When they got land, they had to go to the land, and then in order to keep the land, they had to prove that they had done something on that land.
You have to do the improvement.
They had to make improvement.
They had 5 years.
Yes.
And you had to do a barn, that
wasn't your land anymore.
Yes. Yeah.
And so they had that.
If you look at the applications, and it tells, I've got a couple homesteads, and I was able to find their applications, even though I can't remember where I got them from. And I keep thinking it was NARA, but I'm not sure.
Well, that's where they referred to when they were showing the records. They were referring to NARA. So that's the national. Tell me the whole thing. I always say NARA, but it's the National
Archives.
And then the R's for records.
Administration.
Okay.
How come the Canadian knows this? The Canadian knows this.
But you got American roots.
You got you get so used to saying those acronyms.
400 years ago, Shelley.
I know, but you're a good genealogist. You're gonna know. I'm sitting here. Was it records?
I know.
It's National Records.
We're so used to just saying the acronym.
National Records.
Yeah.
Administration. Okay. Something. I don't know.
NARA people, you can find your homestead records on NARA. So Google NARA, you'll find it.
But the application, what's interesting is you look at those, it tells exactly what they built.
Yes.
So I know my, third great grandfather's house second great grandfather's house was 1 door and 2 windows.
That's so cool.
Where another second great grandparent, they had 2 doors.
Woohoo!
Yeah, and 1 window. So, and then it says the ones in Virginia, which is now West Virginia, when they got to Michigan, they planted 1,000 strawberry plants.
Isn't that cool to have that kind of information?
Okay, I'm getting a visual here now.
Exactly.
The barn, the house,
yes.
It was a log cabin. So, now somebody can draw that picture for me.
Exactly. Well, also she discovered too that on that document that he had to sign his X. So obviously,
yes, he couldn't read or write.
He couldn't read or write. So he signed his X. So she and I'm going
to make one comment about that. Now, this is years ago, and it was either through a course that I took or something, that when we see the X on the paper, we always assume that they couldn't read and write.
Thing.
And
it's only one.
What's that?
It's not always both.
Not always so, because a lot of people knew how to read the Bible.
Correct.
They could read, but they couldn't necessarily write. So we have to be careful, I think, sometimes when we say that they couldn't read and write. I mean, there's a good possibility that if he was a farmer, that it was both. But I think sometimes we have to be a little careful about jumping to that conclusion.
I agree.
Because the Bible back then was such a big part of our ancestors' lives that if there was one thing that they would have been taught to read, if anything, it would have been out of the Bible.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
My great grandmother could read the Bible and couldn't sign her name.
Right.
So
I'm glad you brought that up and clarified that point. So she learned a lot. They even had the map. They, showed her the map where the land was, because a lot of these will have a little, map. And she was so excited about that. And she said, that's a place where my people were, and I loved that tie that she felt.
Of course, we teared up.
Yeah. And she says, I can pinpoint my family now in the history books. Oh, yay. I mean, isn't that what we want to do? We want to learn the history. It's not just like we said this over and over. It's kind of this mantra. It's not just the names, dates, and places, but it's the history. Why were they there? We don't know. And if you hear the beep, my smoke alarm's going off, but I promise you nothing's happening. It just does that every once in a while. So nobody worry.
Letting you know it's time to change.
Nobody worry that I'm going to have to leave because my house is on fire. So I don't know if you heard it or not, but oh my goodness. With that note, anybody who would you like to talk about next? Anybody, Lisa or Christiane? Anybody?
I thought they were both of those had interesting.
They did. They did. Let's just go to Christiane then.
Okay.
Christiane.
Very interesting with with her mom being British and her dad being from Iran.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Catholic and Muslim.
And she said
they're different than Ireland and the Catholic and the Protestant.
Exactly.
But it's similar.
Way different. Things. Yeah, but she said that they made it work, and it taught her that people are the same no matter what. And I just thought that was such a really, really good point.
And two people can be in the same house and have different beliefs and still get along.
Exactly. Yeah. So they went, started with her grandfather, who she was really close to, and was a World War I vet. And he actually enlisted when he was 17 in the Merchant Marines. And so she said, he would never tell any stories, but that's typical, I think, for a lot of our ancestors. I know my dad doesn't speak much about his Vietnam experiences, and I didn't know my paternal grandfather, I was 16 when he passed away, and even if he'd tried earlier, I probably wouldn't have listened because sometimes when you don't listen. And then my maternal grandfather actually died in World War II, so the only stories I know of him are what I find, in the paper and things. But so they kind of just talked about him for a minute, and they skipped back to England, and they actually went quite far back with her in England. And she learned that, she just had common everyday laborers, grocery store, guy that ran the grocery store, just working folks,
Yeah.
And so that's what most of us are. You don't have to do this just because you think you're, related to kings and queens and, noblemen and things like that. Our common ancestors are interesting, and their day-to-day lives are interesting, and, just common.
Well, the military stuff, she was shocked. Because he won an award you know, or not won, but, you know, received an award. So that was something emotional for her.
Yeah, his military papers, they showed her medals that
she got pride with that service. She knew he served, but never knew what he did per se.
Yeah, so I thought that was great. And then to do that jump back to England and learn, you know, just common, ordinary, good folk that she was from. And I think she appreciated knowing that. I really did. And they didn't really show much in the way of documents with that, but they did talk about, again, her family, that most of them were signed with X's as well. So, you know, talking about that not being able to write with her, and how then, you know, the education became important, and then, you know, look what she's doing now. So
exactly.
Yeah. So how that's come down the line for her. And then they went to her paternal side of the family back on, and I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah.
That how her father was from a very wealthy family, and he just said he wanted to be free of it. He just didn't want the pressures and the stuff, you know, that came from all that. And she didn't really understand why until
yeah. Well, what I found was interesting. So I was looking when they showed the family tree, I saw really quickly her father was born in 1914. Right. And she was born in the late 50s. So her father was about 54 when she was born. Which is a big difference, right? You know, there should almost be like another generation between the two of them, and there isn't. So I think in part of that, you know, with her growing up, he would have been retirement age. You know, so being part of that is, okay, why isn't he doing more? Why didn't you do more, Daddy? You know, part of it was, you know, closer to retirement age. But like you were saying, Cheri, that background with those family ties and all those things that went on, you know,
like she said, there's a lot of bloody ties. There was murders and assassinations, and, you know,
all sorts of things.
Yeah, she had a great grandfather who actually was a governor of one of the provinces, and he was murdered.
Yeah.
You know what?
Yeah.
Things that she never knew about.
Now, this what I thought was interesting too is so with that guy, he was what, fifth or sixth great grandfather. He was far back.
Yeah.
I think it was fifth.
Okay.
It might have been.
He was Stefan? I don't know. I'm probably not saying it correctly, where he was governor, and they were saying that was a huge piece of land in Iran.
Didn't they call it the other part of the world?
The other
half of the world.
So that tells you how big the world was back then, and then just how big of a responsibility he had and the position her family was in at that time.
Exactly. And to have that in your background and not know, I'm sure that her father knew. He knew that history, because
I'm sure he did.
Oh, I think he did.
With that station in life that they had, I'm sure he knew about all that, and you know, it was probably part of the persecution and what was going on with him in Iran. So no wonder he wanted to escape, and he wanted to be free, and she just didn't understand that. But getting all this information, I think it really helped her understand her father. You know, and but she did say, "What is wrong with my dad that he didn't share this information?
Why didn't he tell us that?"
That's right.
But you know, we have those same type situations come up. You know, looking at family, and we're like, did she know this? Of course she would have known this. Or why did they hide it? I've got family members that stood at the grave of the grandfather. Why didn't you tell us? What was it with all the lies? Why did you hide this from us? You know, type thing. And my mother, who's going on 89, she said, look, different time. You don't know what was going on, what that situation was. And sometimes they had to do things to survive. So you just don't know what was going on.
Right. And it could be with her dad. He just didn't want to relive that. And maybe he didn't want the burden of all those things onto her. Maybe he figured if he just kept it, didn't talk about it,
as parents, we want to spare our children.
We do. And he had no idea that one day she'd be on a TV show. I'm telling her
a little bit more than a TV show.
Well, I'm saying for her, on Finding Your Roots, he never he didn't realize that she'd be a guest star, and she'd have Dr. Gates sitting in front of her going, and turn the page. And this is your family history. So they did get hers back quite far.
Yes.
And she learned a lot. And I think those things probably helped her connect with her dad, and the things that she learned about her mom's family in England helped connect. How can that not? I mean, we know that when we find those things, it just makes them more alive, makes them real. We want to go visit all those places,
Right.
It makes them real to us. So I thought she had a very, very interesting story. Very interesting.
Something that will be handed down.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm sure if they didn't give her, the documents and the actual history stories and things like that. I mean, for me, that would be one of the first things I would be Googling.
Think of, remember Anne Curry? She said she can't wait to tell her brothers and sisters.
Right.
I think they get a report. If I'm having spoken to some of the other genealogists, having worked on the different shows, I think they get a detailed report.
I can't imagine that they wouldn't. Yeah.
Because what we're seeing is just the highlights.
Exactly.
It's just the highlights.
Exactly. Because those charts
report with everything that would go in more in depth with copies. I would hope with copies of the records so that they could see.
I think they get all of that. And I can't imagine, Johnny's group not doing that. That because they do a lot of the research. The UGA group, the one that Johnny Cerny's in, because that's her in the film that you always see her in the beginning. She's pulling out the old, I call it the old drawer. That was our Google. Digging in a drawer. But there's funny. No doubt, because they're going to keep some sort of a timeline, and I'm actually looking at that thinking, I should give that as a report rather than make a different report and just it's in chronological order. Why not?
They have to with the big. I mean, they can't just give them that big family chart with no explanation.
Exactly.
Right.
So I'm sure that they do. Well, moving on to Lisa Ling, she had quite an interesting story as well. Very interesting. I mean, she basically, I think, kind of said that she grew up feeling so different and so odd. She really didn't even, I don't think, ask very many questions, and just didn't. She was so embarrassed, she said, about her,
the way she looked. She was
the way
different.
she looked, that she just kind of wanted to step away from it.
Bullied too. Tremendously. She said bad. It was bad.
Yeah, it was really bad. So they started with her maternal roots, and thought it was interesting because her grandfather actually owned a brothel.
Yes,
the black dragon.
The black dragon.
They called him.
That was his nickname.
I just thought it was great.
Yeah, I thought so too. And go ahead, Cheri.
She knew that or not?
Well, she kind of said that. I think she did, because she said that she thought that it sounded to her like he was like in the mafia, the Chinese version of the mafia. Yeah. And so, and he had 19 children and 3 wives. Which I thought was interesting.
Which is kind of normal.
And
depending on the time.
Right. And she also said that her mom just didn't feel very much paternal love for him, that he would walk by and kind of pat her on the head.
Pat her on the head. It broke my heart.
Yeah. And not much in the way of fatherly love from him. And so that she felt like that in and of itself really affected her mom. Yeah. And of course it would. But I just thought that story of him being, the Black Dragon and running the brothel was really, really interesting. And then they started going back a little bit farther into his past, and it turns out that his dad ended up having a different surname than his brother.
Right.
And that story, Catherine, do you want to share that story if you can remember what?
So they discovered the family tomb in the cemetery, and it was quite elaborate. So it showed that the family had money. And I know Lisa looked at you like she was really surprised about that. And they said they weren't 100% sure, but this was the theory that they were going on, is that one of the names on the tomb had a different surname than her grandfather's surname. So the grandfather, that line of the family was Wong, and this name was Tsai, Tsai. And Dr. Gates says to Lisa, do you recognize this surname? She's like, no, I've never seen it before in my life.
Right.
And so the theory is that he was the second brother, and that the older brother was a Tsai and he was a Wong. And because the father had married in to the Tsai, so it was they found a document that said that he was marrying into her line, and then the firstborn son would be given the maternal family name, and then the other children would get the Wong name. And it was her family, that maternal line, that had all of the money. So they think what it was that the Wongs were very poor, very, very poor, and that he found this woman and agreed to get married to her and into her family. And they said, even though that was acceptable in their culture, it was not honorable.
Yes. I mean, I can't even imagine. Can you think about that? It makes me, I started thinking, well, did she have to do that because they couldn't marry her off? I mean, just, you know what I mean? Why would she
wonder about all that?
Or
why
did they just
marrying a poor farmer if she was from a rich family? But we don't know her position in the family.
No, exactly.
Maybe she was the youngest daughter. We don't know, right?
Yeah.
They didn't say that. Yeah.
But I had not heard that before. I thought that was a very
I didn't know either. Yeah, that was interesting.
And so
I immediately went to the more of the Spanish Latino naming patterns, trying to understand, was that the same type thing? But it wasn't.
But it wasn't. Exactly.
It was a little different. So,
and they say that might be what influenced the grandfather then to kind of prove he was a man. Because of that marriage, I'm a man, and so he didn't treat women very well, and then he had a lot of wives, and he ran the brothel. So it's kind of a theory; nobody really knows. But I thought that was a really interesting story. Then they went to her paternal line, and her father was, he was with his parents during World War II in Hong Kong. Wasn't it Hong Kong?
Yeah, I think so.
He actually, he didn't eat, and he said that he thought he was so small because he said the father was 6'1", and he was very short, and he believed it was because during the war he was he was malnourished. Which I think is an interesting theory. It's probably true, unless there's just some short people genes in the family line that he got. But the grandfather after the war ended up finding a job in America, so they came to America, and then after he was able to bring the grandmother and her father over, and they had the paper, the ship passenger list with the photo. That photo, they were so happy in that photo. It was like, we've made it to America. I loved that photo. I thought that was so, it spoke volumes of what they had been through. And she made Lisa made the point, what those eyes have seen, just think about what those eyes have seen.
And they didn't pass it down.
And they didn't pass it down.
No.
Absolutely. And same theory, I feel, was that it was just too hard. It was just a very, very hard thing. You just, tell the story is to relive it. And some things you just don't want to relive. However, the grandmother had written a memoir.
Yes.
And they read some from the memoir, and she said, I haven't read that since I was like 16. Yeah, and she says, I need to pull that out, especially in light of everything she was finding out. It's going to mean so much more now.
Oh, definitely.
Reads it. And with whatever, paperwork and documentation they give her, it's going to mean so much more to her. And then of course they went back like 12 generations.
12
generations on that line. That's incredible, into the 1500s.
Yeah.
Incredible. So they tell her that, and then they came back down a little bit to the 1700s and told a remarkable story about an ancestor who started out not so well, but became a hero.
Yeah.
Who'd like to take it away?
Go for it, Kathy.
Kathy, you want to talk about that?
Great-grandfather Howe. What was his name? So I thought he was such a neat character, such a cool ancestor in Lisa's lineage, and that they were able to find out so much information about him. So the 6th great-grandfather wanted to get up in the world, and in order to do that, he had to take what was called the provincial exam so that he could become, I think, governor. And he was not able to pass the exam. So he got posted to some outposts, way out, in the country, but it was on the banks of the Yellow River. And then apparently, 1738 or whatever the year was, there was a great big flood, and the banks of the Yellow River, were flooded. And so in order to save the city, it was a walled city, he 6th great-grandfather Howe ordered the people in the town to get baskets of mud, and then this is the kicker, then to go to the local pawn shop and get all the quilted jackets, coats, pants, and trousers, and help block up the wall. Like, I couldn't
plug it up.
This, right? Can you imagine? And I love how he says this to Skip says to Lisa, and do you think it worked? And of course she's like, this is the most bizarre story I've ever heard in my life, and it did by some.
That's why it got
famous. They were able to stop the flood coming into the town, and great-grandfather Howe is now the local hero.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting to know, how are they going to repay this guy? And so he asked the townspeople to help him study
to take the
exam.
Yeah. And he came in fifth,
and he passed.
The guy was smart. Like, think about it. He was working this thing, right?
Well, he had street smarts, not so much the book smarts, but the dude had street smarts
enough to say, hey, you know what? You guys want to help me pass the exam? And so he passes the exam, and apparently he had like the 5th highest marks for that year,
Love it.
Yeah.
And then he becomes, of course, the governor, and it's all written down in the local history book, which I thought was so fascinating.
Yeah. That was
so funny.
So, what a character.
Loved that.
I love our ancestors. Gosh.
Exactly. That was fabulous, fabulous story. And she says they're a part of me now. And I loved that.
Yeah.
She's gone from, in her earlier years, just not wanting to deal
low
with
self-esteem,
exactly, and not wanting to deal with the fact that of her ancestry, and now to say they're a part of me now, it's just
that was good.
Complete turnaround. It's just wonderful. Now she can go and share that story. So I just loved it. They all three, I thought, were good little tidbits of stories, they all were. And so I really enjoyed enjoyed them, and they each had, different records, and we learned things about different countries, because, I don't know that any of the three of us are ever really going to do, that kind of research. I don't think.
No, it was fascinating because it's not, none of those, I don't have any Asian in my family. I don't have any Middle Eastern in my family. So, for me, it's interesting because I'm learning something new about a different culture that I never had anything, I knew about before.
Exactly. And the cool thing though is records are records, you know? Records are records, and methods
That's
are methods, and people are people.
And they're in the weirdest
people.
Yeah.
They do.
Definitely.
I don't know. I might
terrible
have
things, and they do hero things.
Right.
My future daughter-in-law might be Japanese, so maybe I'll be able to do her Japanese. My son lives in Japan.
Oh, that's right.
And he's been there for years, and he teaches English over there. And so I expect him to come home and come with a wife.
Well, see, now you've learned a little bit of methodology. And
there you go.
When he marries, you can say, I can practice on you.
That's right. That's right.
I can see if I can do this. Oh, goodness. Well, any last thoughts about these three ladies and their journeys to connect with their ancestors?
I enjoyed it. We have one more week, right?
You know what? I think we've got maybe one or two. Maybe one or two. Yeah, I think we do. So
I enjoyed this. I enjoyed this one a lot, and it makes me excited about seeing the next couple of episodes as well.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I'm so happy that you're here, that we could talk amongst ourselves, our Gen friends, and have our Gen friends watch, and we love to hear what you think about these episodes that we discuss. So please leave us some comments and tell us how you felt about this episode. And with that, we will say bye, and we'll see you next time on Gen Friends. Bye, everybody.
Bye.